It's Double Dragon for super players. Stick around, you just might learn something. Fighting games have existed in one form or another since the late 1970s, but many players point to Technos Japan's 1986 release Renegade as the example of the arcade beat-em-up. While the bones of a good beat-em-up are all here, faux 3D movement in a 2D space, a lone player versus hordes of copy-pasted thugs, and of course, sexy women with whips, the beat-em-up genre didn't really crystallize until Technos Japan's follow-up game, Double Dragon, hit arcades in 1987. Notice I said follow-up, not sequel. Although it was made by the same company and had many of the same creative staff, Double Dragon was only a spiritual successor to Renegade. The eponymous Renegade himself, Mr. K, was nowhere to be seen. In his place we had the twin martial artists Hammer and Spike, whose names were later changed to Billy and Jimmy, and ultimately Bimmy and Jimmy. In an intro cutscene that is at once hilariously blunt and uncomfortably sexual, Billy's girlfriend Marion is punched in the gut and carted away by an evil gang known as the Black Warriors. Billy and Jimmy spend the rest of the game slowly shuffling across roughly 4 city blocks to try and get her back. I say Billy and Jimmy because, in a first for the beat-em-up genre, Double Dragon featured 2-person cooperative play. Of course, it was only cooperative until the very end, where you and your partner faced off in a fight to the death. Like the Mario Brothers before them, or Street Fighter's Ryu and Ken that same year, the 2-player characters were identical palette swaps of each other. But co-op wasn't Double Dragon's only significant first. Unlike Renegade, which gave you free reign over a relatively small play area, Double Dragon locked you into a single section of its comparatively massive scrolling levels until you'd beaten all the baddies, at which point it gave you a signal to proceed to the next screen. This go signal became an indispensable part of the beat-em-up genre, so much so that in Japan, this type of game is known as a belt scroller, because the intermittent scrolling resembles a conveyor belt starting and stopping. Another major novelty that Double Dragon brought to the table was the ability to knock a weapon out of an enemy's hand, pick it up, and use it against them. In Renegade, wielding weapons was a skill restricted only to bad guys. Like the go signal, this also became a major staple of the beat-em-up genre. Double Dragon was a massive hit in arcades, and like many popular arcade games of the day, it swiftly received home conversions for every video game console from A to Z. A in this case being the Atari 2600, and Z being Britain's beloved ZX Spectrum. But perhaps the best remembered port of the game, and the one we'll be discussing today, is the Nintendo Entertainment System version from 1988. Of course, by 1988, the NES hardware was 5 years old, even if it had only been out in America for 3. Mapper chips built into game cartridges allowed games to use more memory, but it still didn't measure up to most newer arcade games. The home version of Double Dragon made use of the MMC1 mapper chip, but some compromises still had to be made to bring such a complex game onto a more primitive home system. The most obvious difference is the graphics. Characters and environments are smaller and less detailed, but that's merely cosmetic. A much more substantial difference is the way that the NES version of Double Dragon handled multiplayer. 2-person cooperative play only barely worked on arcade hardware, with the frame rate noticeably dragging, so it was completely out of the question on the less advanced NES, although it may be worth noting that the Atari 2600 somehow managed it. Instead, the developers at Technos opted for a turn-based 2-player mode, similar to 1985's Super Mario Bros. However, unlike Super Mario Bros., where the second player was a distinct character, if only barely, both Player 1 and Player 2 took control of Billy Lee. His brother Jimmy was nowhere to be found. The developers at Technos tried to compensate for both of these shortcomings, graphics and multiplayer, with the newly added Mode B, which had bigger, more detailed sprites and allowed for simultaneous 2-player action. However, Mode B is a one-on-one fighting game that takes place in a small arena, a far cry from the original game's 2 against the world street brawling. And even then, Mode B doesn't allow Player 1 and 2 to be separate characters. The NES, even with an MMC1 mapper chip, only had the capacity to load one sprite at once, so players must face off as differently colored clones of each other. That same sprite limitation extends to Mode A, the NES interpretation of the original arcade game. You'll only ever face off against 2 enemies at a time, and even then, there'll always be 2 duplicates of the same character. Loading more than one unique enemy at a time is beyond the game's technical capability. Speaking of enemies, the Black Warrior Gang consists of 5 main combatants who recur over and over again throughout the game. They always face you 2 at a time, and often when you defeat one, another will wander in from off-screen to take their place. The first enemy you'll encounter is Williams, a generic street thug who goes down in a couple of hits. He's not all that tough, but he's capable of wielding weapons, such as a bat, a throwing dagger, and the most dangerous weapon in the whole game, a stick of dynamite. His name is meant to be an homage to Jim Kelly's character from Enter the Dragon, a film that served as a major inspiration for Double Dragon. Linda, sometimes called Linda Lash in promotional materials, is the only female member of the Black Warriors. Like the vast majority of female beat-em-up enemies, she wields a whip as her primary weapon. Tougher than both Linda and Williams is Roper, a villain who, oddly enough, is sometimes black and sometimes white. He can pick up really heavy objects, like crates and barrels, and hurl them at you. Of course, you can also hurl them right back at him. Like Williams, his name is also an homage to an Enter the Dragon character, John Saxon's compulsive gambler, Roper. A pair of Ropers serve as the warm-up for the first level's boss, a Bobo. He is by far the toughest enemy in the game. A colossal, oddly proportioned muscle man with a 100 megaton punch and an equally devastating kick. One thing you can say about him, he knows how to make an entrance. A Bobo has a penchant for bursting through the wall before he attacks. Although he starts out as a boss, a Bobo is quickly demoted to just another rank-and-file Black Warrior, attacking 2 at a time, just like everyone else. He even shows up in a lime green variation a couple of times, possibly as an homage to the Incredible Hulk. A Bobo is not the only level boss who suffers a demotion. Chintai, a shirtless martial artist who kinda looks like Bruce Lee, if you squint, shows up first as the boss of level 2, and many times thereafter as a regular enemy. Like Williams, he has the ability to throw knives. He also has an absolutely maddening body slam attack. These 5 enemies, appearing over and over again in different color combinations, make up the vast majority of the Black Warriors. You might have noticed that this gang is all over the place aesthetically. Linda is dressed like she's going to the gym later, and Roper is dressed like a refugee from Waterworld. Clearly their boss failed to impose any sort of dress code. Speaking of their boss, if you can make it through the hordes of Lindas, Chintais, and Abobos, you'll face off against Willie, the only person in the entire game with enough sense to bring a gun to a fistfight. Strangely enough, between him, Billy Lee, and the aforementioned Williams, 3 distinct characters in this game are named some variation of William. If you can beat the odds and conquer a machine gun with your bare fists, the final enemy you'll face is actually Jimmy Lee, player 2 from the arcade game, who is now inexplicably blonde due to the NES's color palette limitations. As a more or less identical twin to the game's protagonist Billy, Jimmy has all the same moves that you do. Speaking of which, let's talk about Billy Lee's moveset. The key thing about Billy Lee's moves is you don't get access to them all at once. A unique addition to the NES version of Double Dragon, even among the various home ports of the game, is the inclusion of experience points, a feature you'd be more likely to find in a role-playing game like Final Fantasy than a street brawler. For every 1,000 experience points, you earn a heart. Each heart grants you a new martial arts skill. By the time you collect all 7 hearts, you'll have access to even more moves than Billy had in the arcade game. Unlike most games with an experience point system, you earn points here not for each foe defeated, but for each blow that connects. Weaker attacks earn you slightly more experience points, and stronger attacks grant you slightly fewer. Combined with the fact that it takes many more weak attacks to down a foe than strong attacks, this means that you get exponentially more experience points by using your less powerful moves. There's an element of strategy here, because while you can use your more powerful kick to quickly defeat all of the weaker enemies in the game, you'll miss out on a lot of XP, and when tougher enemies like a Bobo show up, you won't have unlocked the advanced moves you need to defeat him. It's a clever way to make sure players actually take advantage of the game's varied moveset, as opposed to the arcade game, where you could basically spam the backwards elbow smash over and over and win the whole thing. It's understandable. If I spent long hours at the office programming and animating a spinning kick, I'd want to make sure someone used it. You start out with only 1 heart, which grants you the basic punch, the more powerful kick, and a completely useless headbutt attack. You also have the ability to jump, but that's less an attack and more a means of traversing the world. This is one of the obvious places that the NES hardware necessitates a compromise. The arcade had 3 buttons, but the NES controller only has 2. So while punch and kick are mapped to A and B, you'll need to press both buttons simultaneously in order to jump. It's not an elegant solution, but it works. Your second heart, earned at 1000 experience points, is a powerful uppercut. You can perform this move by hitting the punch button when an enemy is stunned. It's an instant knockdown, but that can actually be a liability if you're trying to earn experience points, since you don't want to kill your foes too quickly. Heart number 3 nets you a jump kick. This move completely replaces your regular jump. Most enemies can easily dodge it, and it does minimal damage and grants only a tiny amount of XP, but it's useful as an escape when you're cornered, and, like the uppercut, it serves as an instant knockdown when it connects. One major caveat: as soon as you learn this move, Roper and Williams learn it too. Their jump attacks can be annoying, but again, they don't deal very much damage. The fourth heart you earn grants you the infamous hair pull kick. The exact timing is a mystery, but sometimes, instead of a regular kick, Billy will grab his opponent by the hair. Here you can either press the kick button to knee them in the face, or press the punch button to throw them over your shoulder, or you can mix and match. Just make sure to kick before you throw. The move you earn with the fifth heart is by far the most viscerally satisfying. You can now walk up to a downed opponent, press down on the control pad to sit on them, and punch them to death. This leaves you open to an attack from that enemy's buddy, so it's best used sparingly. Also, there are 1 or 2 foes that it doesn't work on. A Bobo and the final boss Willy will simply shake you off, as will your twin brother Jimmy, and Shintai will only lie there and take it when he's already taken quite a lot of damage. The sixth heart is the single most powerful move in the entire game. If you press punch while an opponent is behind you, instead of a punch, Billy will perform a backwards elbow strike. It's not absolutely necessary, but I highly recommend getting this ability before level 3. Be careful not to use it when sandwiched between 2 enemies, as Billy will either punch or strike, depending on whether the enemy in front or in back is closer. Since there are a lot of different moves and very few buttons, many of the inputs, such as this one, are a little opaque and rely more on circumstances than correct action. The seventh and final heart isn't really worth it. It makes it so that your third kick is now a spinning roundhouse, but most enemies can simply duck under it. You're more likely to connect with a regular kick, and as a great man once said, it doesn't matter how strong you are if you can't hit me. Double Dragon lacks any sort of save feature, so you'll be starting from 0 every time. Your success or failure can depend on how quickly you can rack up those hearts. The lack of a save feature was fairly standard at the time. Some prestige releases like Nintendo's own Legend of Zelda had a battery save built into the cartridge, and other games like Metroid had an incredibly convenient password system. Seriously, the people who write Bible verses on grains of rice need to try fitting an entire Metroid password into the notes section of the instruction booklet. But most games expected you to start fresh from the beginning every time you played, like Double Dragon. This was true even for huge releases, like Super Mario Bros. 3 in 1990. By their very nature, games where you couldn't save couldn't be very long. After all, you'd have to be able to make it through the whole game in one sitting, and it's not reasonable to expect someone to play a game for 6 or 8 hours at one time. I mean, people do it, but it's not reasonable to expect them to. But then, as now, video games were very expensive, and no one wanted to drop the equivalent of 96 present-day dollars to have half an hour of fun. Furthermore, if your game could be beaten in less time than it took to watch a movie, what's to stop little Jimmy from renting your game from the video store, finishing it, returning it, and never buying it? Most game developers in the 1980s independently arrived at the same solution to this problem: make the games hard. Double Dragon for NES is only 4 levels long. You could beat the entire thing in 20 minutes, but that's assuming you never mess up, never get hit, never miss a jump, and never die. The game punishes you at every opportunity, and only gives you 3 lives before you have to start over again from the beginning. In the 1980s, many people measured a video game's value by how long it took to complete, and since the games themselves couldn't be very long, developers tried to make games that took a very long time to learn. Many games of this era demanded not just skill, but mastery. Not just any video game player could do it. If you could make it all the way to the end of Double Dragon, you could confidently call yourself a super player. So without further ado, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how you can become a Double Dragon master. The first level of Double Dragon on the NES is fairly short, but playing this level well will prepare you for success later on. The gang of Williams at the beginning of the level can be quickly defeated with a series of kicks, but that's not the right move in this situation. Instead, try to limit yourself to only punching. You'll have a shorter range and the Williams can retaliate, but you'll earn a substantial amount of XP. Try to stay just on the edge of punching distance. It makes it more difficult for the Williams to punch back. Your next encounter is with a pair of Lindas, one of whom is wielding a whip. You'll want to kick the whip-wielding Linda once, but after that, switch back to punches. It may be tempting to pick up the whip Linda dropped, but it's not worth it. You'll get more experience from punching. Just make sure to take care of the Linda who dropped her whip quickly, or she'll pick it back up. The other Linda will never pick up the weapon, so there's no need to worry about her. By the time the second Linda goes down, you may have already earned your second heart, or if not, you'll definitely be close to 1,000 experience points. Continue to limit yourself to punches with the ropers on the next screen. If one of them picks up the barrel, walk in front of him and then quickly walk away. If you time it right, he'll commit to throwing the barrel and miss you entirely. This strategy for the next section depends entirely on how much health you have left. If you're running low, kick the Linda with the whip, then pick up the whip when she drops it. You can kill all the Lindas from a distance with the whip, and it's not worth the risk of losing a life on the first stage, since this game has no 1-ups. If you have a good amount of health left after the ropers, disarm the whip-wielding Linda, but instead of picking up the whip, go back to punching. Keep an eye on the whip, as some of the new Lindas will try to pick it up. If that happens, kick to make them drop it, and then punch them out. When the door opens, you can proceed into the next room for the boss fight. Every time you enter a new room, your health will be fully restored. This means you have enough energy left to punch out the 2 ropers and earn some extra XP. Be warned, if you've already got 3 stars, these ropers will know how to jump kick. Once the ropers are gone, a Bobo will burst through the wall. Don't try anything cute here. Just lure him onto the conveyor belt and try to kick him off the edge. Keep your distance. His attacks are high damage and long range. If you have 3 hearts by this point, it may be worth trying a jump kick, but make sure you have enough room to land, or you may go sailing to your death. Also, a Bobo might dodge your jump kick. If that happens, move up as quickly as possible to avoid his punishing moves. At the end of a successful run of the first level, you should have either 3 or 4 hearts. The suddenly white ropers at the start of level 2 will try to hit you with the crate. Use the same technique you used for the barrel, and feint them into throwing it early. Continue with your all punching all the time strategy. Don't worry, you'll be kicking, bashing, and whipping soon enough. After the ropers comes the level's first gotcha moment. A Williams with a stick of dynamite rushes in from off screen. Do not let him hit you, as it will destroy a huge chunk of your health. Instead, stand in front of him briefly so he commits to a throw, then quickly move away. You can pick up the dynamite and use it yourself, but the risk of being caught in an explosion is too great. I recommend keeping your distance. Check the number of hearts you have. If it's less than 3, you're going to have to grind a little. Once the dynamite is out of the picture, kick the Williams once and walk away. Repeat ad infinitum. He won't actually die until he gets knocked down, and he usually won't fall down until you kick him more than once. By keeping him in an endless loop of kicks, you can build up enough XP to earn any hearts you may need. You need 3 hearts because this next section is much easier with the jump kick. Climb up the grating on the back wall and walk across the gap. You'll find that this part of the level is an entirely 2D plane. There's no Z-axis. As such, you can't dodge the Williams with a baseball bat. Jump kick him and he'll drop his baseball bat. You can also take him on with regular kicks, but you're much more likely to get hit. Once you get a hold of his bat, wait until he gets up and hit him with it. Every hit will cause a knockdown, and 2 should be enough to kill him. The next part can be tricky. Climbing down the grating can result in a very unfair death, since the hitbox for falling into the pit is way too big. Instead, jump down from the top of the grate. A gang of Williams will be down there waiting for you. One of them may have dynamite. Keep an eye out and make sure to dodge it as before. The bat should make short work of the Williams, but there's always a chance they might jump kick and cause you to drop it. You can try and pick it back up, but regular kicks will also work. There's a glitch in the game here that can earn you infinite XP. If you leave after the first Williams appears, then come back and hit the spot where he was with your bat, the game will register each bat swing as a hit on an enemy. Honestly, this trick is difficult to pull off, and not really worth it. At this point in the game, you should already have 4 or 5 hearts just from playing normally. Once the Williams are gone, you'll be confronted with another pack of Lindas. You need to conserve health for the end of the level, so kick the first Linda, grab her whip, and use it to kill the rest. The construction site is another section with no Z-axis, so you can't dodge enemy attacks. Take advantage of the whip's range to kill the Lindas before they can touch you. Remember, you can hit them even when they're on the ladder. Chintai is waiting at the top of the tower, and there are a couple of ways to beat him. It's tempting to spam the jump kick, but it takes a ridiculous number of hits to kill him, and if he dodges, you have no way to avoid his punishment move. The best strategy is to try and get him in a hair pull kick. Try kicking him from a distance and holding the button just a little longer. The exact science of it eludes me. And there's an element of pure luck to avoiding Chintai's body slams, but if you have enough health left, it shouldn't be too tough. This is why it's necessary to avoid William's dynamite. There are no health restoring items in the game, so you need to make sure you hang on to enough of your health bar to survive the boss fights. Speaking of which, the biggest challenge of level 3 is to avoid losing too much health before the level's midpoint, where you'll have to face off against 2 Abobos at once. This one is a lot longer than levels 1 and 2, and also a lot longer than the upcoming level 4. This is also where the NES port diverges the furthest from the original arcade game. If you have less than 6 hearts, you may want to keep your punch-only strategy for the first screen. Just make sure to trick the Williams into throwing their knives before you approach. After the Williams, you'll have to face off against 3 Chintais in a row. Remember 2 minutes ago when this guy was a level boss? Since you have a Z-axis again, you have a chance to escape if you miss a jump kick, but it will still be faster to hit him with a series of hair pull kicks. Honestly, sometimes it is pure luck whether he hits you with his body slam or just takes your kicks like a man. Try to guard yourself as best you can. If you've managed to get 6 hearts by this point, you can try and hit him with your elbow jab. Chintai will duck under the elbow jab, so walk away slightly and try again. Of course, sometimes the game will just randomly decide that you hit each other at the same time, even though Chintai clearly didn't move. After the 3 Chintais, you'll encounter a Williams with a bat. Jump kick him immediately, grab the bat, teach him a little respect. The Williams on the other side of the bridge has a knife, and he will throw it at you when you jump across. It's very easy to get knocked into the river and lose one of your precious lives. You need to jump kick again immediately after you land, and knock the knife out of the Williams' hand. You can take out most of the Williams with the bat. Watch out for jump kicks and additional knives. The next 2 screens have 1 roper each. The best way to take them out is to knock them down, sit on them, and punch them to death. The screen after that has 2 ropers at once, which complicates things. One of them can get you while you're on top of the other, so the strategy here is divide and conquer. If you can lure 1 roper to the other side of the screen, you should be fine. The next screen is probably the second toughest part of the game. 2 Abobos will burst out from the wall and attack you at once. Now this is just unfair. In the arcade game there was 1 Abobo for each player, but here it's 2 against 1. The secret here is the elbow smash. Turn your back to an Abobo, wait until he gets close to you, then mash on the punch button. If he ducks it, walk away a little, then try again. If you're up against the wall, try jump kicking past him to free up some room. You could try and take out the Abobos with jump kicks alone, but that will take 16 hits per Abobo, as opposed to 4 hits from the elbow smash. And again, sometimes you'll connect with an elbow jab, but the game will randomly decide that Abobo attacked you at the same time, and you'll both fall down. To me, this is the video game equivalent of a news program claiming to give both sides of an issue by interviewing a scientist and a crackpot. If you can survive the computer's brazen cheating and make it through the fight, do not walk forward. The entire level will loop and you'll have to do everything again. Yes, for some reason, the developers decided that the game would just suddenly work differently. There are a number of traps like this throughout the tougher second half of the game. To proceed, you need to go through one of the holes the Abobos broke through the wall. The second half of the level is entirely 2D, and more akin to a Castlevania-type platforming game than a beat-em-up. In the first room of the cavern, bubblegum-colored stalactites will fall from the ceiling. There's a risk of getting caught in a deadly loop when you get knocked into one stalactite after another. Keep an eye on the ceiling, not your character. If you see a stalactite directly above you, move back out of the way. That should take you most of the way, and once you reach the end, the stalactites will vanish and Mega Man-style moving platforms will appear. The jump kick is not precise, but as long as the platform is sort of above you, you should be okay. If you miss the jumps here, you won't die, but you will have to fight a room full of enemies just to loop around to the stalactites again. Don't bother with trying to land on all 3 platforms. You can jump from the middle platform directly to the other side of the chasm. On the other side of the chasm, 2 Chintais will emerge from the door and attack. The elbow smash and jump kick are your friends here. Knock down the closest Chintai with the elbow smash, then jump kick past the second one to the other side of the screen. These guys are pretty tough, but don't worry about losing too much health. As long as you don't lose it all, you'll be fine, because your health will return when you go through the door. It's a rave and a cave in the next room, with conspicuously changing colors that symbolize either the Black Warrior's impressive mood lighting or an improbable indoor thunderstorm. This room also has a fairly easy exploit. If your health gets too low, you can go back through the door, then return to have all your health restored. This is a rare moment of kindness from the Double Dragon dev team. Of course, it's not all good news. When you return to the chamber, the dynamite-toting Williams will all be restored as well. In 2D, the dynamite can be a real problem, since dodging is out of the question. Walk up to one Williams, then walk away. Now rush up to the dynamite, pick it up, and chuck it at the Williams' head. It doesn't matter if you're only 2 inches away, the explosion won't hurt you. If you can get a Williams down, sit on top of him and beat him. Just make sure another Williams doesn't get the drop on you. Speaking of drops, the next section of the game will have a lot of them. Jumping here is dangerous, as you might sail right into a pit that you can't even see. Instead, just let Billy fall down each level. Don't worry, the fall won't hurt anything except your pride. Jump across the gaps you come to and watch for another round of stalactites before you reach another, less than cool looking drops. Be careful here, because sometimes this inaccurate platforming can be more dangerous than any of the Black Warriors. 2 bright green Abobos are guarding the door. This fight is actually pretty simple compared to the last double Abobo assault. The green Abobos will only attack 1 at a time, and 4 elbow smashes will be enough to take each of them out. Still, don't let your guard down. Abobo can still kill you in just a couple of hits. Now, even though I just said not to let your guard down, in the next area you can absolutely let your guard down. The only enemies here are unarmed Lindas, and you don't even have to fight the first batch. In fact, you don't have to climb any of these ladders or traverse any of these platforms. Jump kick off the first platform, fall down the ledge, and you'll end up in front of a door full of Lindas. You can take them all out fairly easily with a series of kicks. Once they're all gone, the door below will open, climb down, and head through. Congratulations! You just made it through the longest level of the game. The longest, maybe, but not the hardest. Level 4 opens with one of the most infuriating booby traps in the history of video games. The sections of the wall will pop out as you walk by, and each one does a large amount of damage, and often knocks you into another section of the wall. You'll find a lot of conflicting advice online about what exactly to do here, and no strategy will work consistently every time. I won't lie, it's entirely possible to lose every single one of your lives here in about 20 seconds. So far, the best method I've found is to wait until the top block on the left pops out, pauses, then pops out again. Start moving just as the second pop-out starts. This will work most of the time, but it's certainly not foolproof. Remember when I said the duel of Bobos in level 3 were the second hardest part of the game? This is the hardest. 2 Chintais will appear at the very end of the platform. One of them will appear directly in front of you with a knife. Jump kick right before he appears, although you'd have to be psychic to get the timing exactly right. And you just might manage to knock the knife out of his hand. Don't move too quickly to avoid him, because it's possible, and indeed probable, that you'll fall right off the edge to your death. The same strategy for past Chintais will work here, but the addition of knives and bottomless pits complicates things. The most satisfying strategy is to do a hair pull grab and throw them into the abyss. But it doesn't work consistently, since Chintai always has a random chance of body slamming you before your kick lands, and a cliff edge is not a good place to get body slammed. As if this army of Chintais wasn't enough, on the very next screen an Abobo bursts from the wall, but I have some good news for you. You don't have to fight him. If you do fight him, another Abobo will appear after, and then, eventually, you'll loop back around to the wall trap again. It's probably the single most mean-spirited design trick in the entire game. Instead of continuing this literal endless cycle of violence, climb up the wall and away from the Abobo. Upstairs, an army of ropers is waiting for you, but they're unarmed and relatively harmless compared to the Chintais and Abobos downstairs. The only real threat is if you lost most of your health on the wall trap and to the Chintais, and let's be real, you totally did. Try to hit these guys with hair pull kicks, and watch out for their jump kicks. Once you take them all out, you can go through the door behind them. Remember, simply traveling through doors restores all your health. Hospitals must be going broke in the world of Double Dragon. Go out the door, and suddenly we're in Mega Man again. You don't have to fight any of the Williams here, but the major threat that they pose is that they may punch you off the platforms. Jump kick past the first Williams and proceed up and down until you come to the first moving platform. Stand at the base of the ladder and don't jump until the platform is roughly level with you, or you'll overshoot. If you can keep one Williams in your field of vision, a new one won't spawn from any of the doors you walk past. Give yourself some lead room for the next jump onto a moving platform. If you jump directly from the edge, you'll overshoot it. The same is true for the next moving platform, but don't be too worried. The higher up you go, the more likely a missed jump will land you on another platform, not a bottomless pit. The Golden Dragon Door is your path to the final area of the game. You know it's going to be something special, because the Double Dragon theme song starts blasting the second you step inside. The first section of the final room is nothing but Williams. This is the final belt scroller section of the entire game, so enjoy it while you can. Hair pull kicks are your best bet here, and a jump kick helps you if you get cornered. It may go without saying, but watch out for the spikes at the bottom of the screen. They're an instant kill. When you get to the big room, the enemies come out in descending order of difficulty. First, it's a fight against 2 abobos. Try to elbow smash them, but be careful not to stand between them. If you have an enemy in front of and behind you, the game won't know whether to make you jab or punch. If you're caught in the middle, try to jump kick past one of the abobos. Next, it's one last pair of chin ties, and one of them has a knife. If you trick him into throwing the knife into the wall, it will actually break the game for a second. The screen bugs out and an absolutely bizarre sound effect plays. You do want to make him do this, however, because it can give you a chance to grab the knife and throw it back at him. Hair pull kicks are still your best bet against these guys, but sometimes the game just decides that they'll body slam you without any rhyme or reason. After the twin chin ties, you have to contend with a pair of Lindas. They're unarmed and hardly a challenge. The same is true for a hapless pair of ropers. Just like in the first level, these ropers are the advanced team for the level boss. Willie is incredibly tough, but far from invincible. His gun will almost kill you the first time he connects, and totally kill you the second time. Of course, if you took too much damage from his advanced team, the first time might be enough. If you die here, you have to face the entire gauntlet of enemies again, starting with the abobos, and that's only in the unlikely event that you have any lives left. There's one spot in the room where Willie has a hard time shooting you, just below the carpet on around the 3rd row of bricks. You can camp out there and kick him, but just because he might not shoot you doesn't mean he's helpless. His punches and kicks can still take out huge chunks of your health. Try to kick him and keep your distance. Once Willie is dead, you've triggered the game's final checkpoint. If you die here, you start from after defeating Willie, but again, that doesn't do you any good if you don't have any lives left. Jimmy, the true final boss, has all the same moves you do. The best way to beat him is, as always, the elbow smash. He can take a huge number of hits before he goes down, but keep spamming punch as he walks up behind you. After this particularly grueling ordeal, you'll see that Marion has been chilling in relative comfort this whole time, in the surprisingly luxurious back room of this urban street gang's sprawling mountainous cavern hideout. Of course, all of this is much easier said than done, so give it a go, and see if you can earn the right to call yourself a super player. If you're interested in trying out Double Dragon for the NES, it's one of the free NES games that comes with Nintendo Switch Online. And of course, everybody who's anybody has Nintendo Switch Online, right? If you don't have it though, the game is for sale on the Nintendo eShop, PlayStation Store, and the Xbox Store, both individually and as part of the Double Dragon Kunio-kun Retro Brawler Bundle, which, despite its misleading name, contains mostly sports games. If you hate yourself, there's also a plug-and-play option that looks like an arcade machine, but for some reason plays the NES version of the game. Oddly enough, you can get one of these at Bed Bath & Beyond for about $20. Of course, you could be an absolute madman and hunt down the original cartridge, which goes for about $15 loose and $60 with the box. But that's fighting a losing battle. You see, when Nintendo brought their family computer to America, they changed the cute, compact design to look like a gigantic VCR. And in fixing something that wasn't broken, they broke it. Every time you put a game into the cool VCR-like Zero Insertion Force slot, you would bend the pins ever so slightly. This was a flaw of the design, and as a result, every NES will eventually just break, and you'll have no way to play your new cartridge. You could try using one of the top-loading NES 2 units from 1993 instead, but they only have an RF video out, so all your games will look like this. Sure, Nintendo's hardware patents have expired, but NES clones are never quite correct, and aftermarket repairs can only get you so far. I don't collect physical cartridges myself because my wife would murder me in cold blood if I spent the next 6 months of rent on a copy of Stadium Events. But from where I'm standing, you're better off buying digital. The point is, if you want to give Double Dragon for the NES a try, you've got options. Until next time, play on, super players. Play on.